The movie Grave of the Fireflies is often considered one of the saddest war films ever made. This heartbreaking story is based on real events that took place during World War II. I watched this film on a friend's recommendation, and today, I'm here to explain its story. The movie was released in 1988, and trust me, it is truly heart-wrenching. At the beginning of the story, we see a boy dressed in a uniform. He narrates that he died on September 21st, 1945, meaning he is already dead. He watches another boy sitting nearby in a terrible state, barefoot, wearing tattered clothes, and suffering from severe malnutrition. The boy is, in fact, looking at his own body, reflecting on how he died. His condition is so dire that flies are buzzing around him, yet the people around merely glance at him and move on, ignoring him completely. But he is not alone. There are other boys in similar conditions. He then utters a name, Setsuko. The setting is a train station. A guard approaches and checks the boy before coldly remarking, "Here's another one." His lifeless eyes indicate that his suffering has come to an end. The scene then shifts to an earlier time. In the sky, we see a fleet of planes approaching. An air raid is about to begin. People start panicking and rushing to find shelter. The boy in uniform, whom we saw earlier, instructs everyone to seek safety. This boy is Seita, our main protagonist. Before leaving, Seita quickly buries some belongings for safekeeping. His mother and younger sister, Setsuko, come to him, telling him that they are heading toward a shelter. His mother instructs him to take whatever essential items they might need and join them soon. She also reminds Setsuko to listen to her older brother. With that, she departs for the shelter. Without wasting any time, Seita gathers a few important things: his father's photograph, Setsuko's doll, and some clothes. He then takes his little sister with him and starts running. But just as they are about to leave, loud explosions begin to echo all around them. As Seita steps outside, he realizes that an air raid is underway. Planes are dropping incendiary bombs from the sky, causing fires to spread rapidly in every direction. The entire city is engulfed in flames, and the chaos terrifies little Setsuko. Seita frantically searches for a safe place to hide. After finding temporary shelter, they wait for the bombing to stop. When the raid finally ends, they start moving again. As they walk, Setsuko suddenly realizes that she has lost one of her shoes. She tells her brother, who reassures her, "It's okay. I'll get you a new pair." Trying to lighten the mood, she proudly shows him her small purse and exclaims, "Look, Seita! I have lots of money!" But when she opens it, only fake paper notes fall out. Seita smiles and gently says, "Wow, Setsuko! You're so rich." As they continue walking, dark rain begins to pour. This is black rain, caused by smoke and ash from the massive fires. They pass by burned-down homes, the destruction of war evident all around them. Many people have died in the attack. Setsuko, still innocent, asks, "Seita, do you think our house burned down too?" Seita, trying to stay strong for her, replies, "Yes, probably. But don't worry, Dad will take revenge. You'll see, he'll make them pay one by one." He says this with confidence because their father is in the Imperial Japanese Navy, fighting in World War II against the United States. Everywhere, the atmosphere is filled with grief. People mourn the loss of their loved ones. Some have lost everything, and in their despair even find comfort in knowing that they are not suffering alone. Amidst the destruction, a man arrives on a bicycle, announcing through a loudspeaker that everyone must head to the first elementary school, which has been turned into a medical relief center. Throughout the journey, Setsuko keeps asking about their mother, wondering if she is also there. Hoping to find her, Seita takes Setsuko to the school. At the elementary school, as Seita gets Setsuko checked by the doctors, a frantic woman suddenly rushes toward him. She asks, "Seita, have you seen your mother?" Then, in a grave tone, she tells him, "Your mother is severely injured. You need to go see her." The woman reassures Seita that she will take care of Setsuko while he goes to see his mother. Seita rushes to where the injured are being treated and encounters a man wearing glasses. The man looks at him and says, "I've been waiting for you." He then shows Seita a green ring and asks, "Is this your mother's?" Seita immediately recognizes the ring. The man then leads him to his mother's bedside. What Seita sees is horrifying. His mother's entire body is wrapped in bandages. The man explains, "She's been completely burned, but she's still breathing. You should take her to a hospital." Seita, overwhelmed with shock, steps outside and finds Setsuko happily playing with the woman who had offered to take care of her. When Setsuko asks about their mother, Seita doesn't have the heart to tell her the truth. Instead, he gently says, "She's just a little sick, but they are going to take her to Nishinomiya." He then tells her, "We will also go there and stay at our aunt's house." Seita carefully places the ring inside Setsuko's purse and tells her, "Keep this safe." The kind woman who had helped them offers, "If you want, you can stay at my house for a few days." However, Setsuko starts crying uncontrollably. She just wants to see her mother. No matter how much Seita tries to comfort her, she refuses to stop crying. Then, the heartbreaking truth unfolds. Their mother has passed away. With no proper funerals being held due to the war, her body is burned along with the many other corpses. Unaware of this, Setsuko is still waiting to see her mother. Seita had already taken her to their aunt's house in Nishinomiya. When he returns home, Setsuko eagerly asks, "Big brother, where's mom?" Seita, unable to tell her the truth, remains silent. He forces a smile and repeats, "She's still sick." Their aunt approaches him and asks about their mother. Even to her, Seita lies, saying that their mother is still recovering. Hearing this, their aunt sighs in relief and says, "At least your father is in the Navy. Because of that, families like yours get extra support." The next day, Seita returns to his destroyed home to retrieve the belongings he had buried before the bombing. Among the items, he finds a tin can filled with fruit candies. He eats one and keeps the rest in his pocket. He gathers everything he can onto a cart and brings it to his aunt's house, hoping it will help them. However, instead of gratitude, his aunt sarcastically remarks, "The families of soldiers always get everything." She takes all the supplies without appreciation, making Seita feel uncomfortable. Later, when she asks about his mother, Seita finally admits, "She passed away 2 days ago." His aunt looks at him in shock. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Seita explains that he hid the truth for Setsuko's sake, as he didn't want her to suffer. His aunt advises him, "You should inform your father by letter." A moment of joy amidst the darkness. That evening, Seita takes Setsuko outside to lift her spirits. They laugh and play together under the night sky. To cheer her up, he catches fireflies and shows them to her, making her eyes sparkle with wonder. Then, with a warm smile, he says, "Open your mouth." Setsuko eagerly obeys, and Seita places a fruit drop candy on her tongue. The sweet taste delights her, making her giggle happily. For a brief moment, war, loss, and hunger are forgotten. Later, as Setsuko plays with her toys, Seita sits quietly, reading a newspaper. His aunt approaches him and questions his daily routine. "Seita, don't you have anywhere to go? No work? No school?" Seita sighs and replies, "My school and home were both burned down in the attack. I have nowhere to go." His aunt presses further. Did you at least write to your father? He nods. Yes, I sent a letter 10 days ago, but I haven't received any response. Discrimination at the dinner table. That evening, the aunt serves dinner to her family. She gives her daughter and husband a proper meal, warm bowls of ramen. But when it's Seita and Setsuko's turn, she only gives them plain rice with water. Seita notices the difference but remains silent, feeling helpless. Just as they finish eating, the air raid siren suddenly blares. Everyone rushes to the bomb shelter, knowing that enemy fighter jets could attack at any moment. Inside the shelter, the air is suffocatingly hot, making it unbearable. Little Setsuko struggles in the heat, fidgeting and feeling restless. She hates being stuck in such a miserable place, but this is their cruel reality in the middle of war. The next day, Seita tries to cheer up Setsuko by taking her to the beach. They splash in the water, laugh, and play around. At one point, Seita even pretends to be a ghost to scare his little sister, making her giggle. However, amidst the fun, Seita notices something concerning. Setsuko's body is covered in painful blisters due to the extreme heat inside the bomb shelter. He quickly dampens his undershirt and gently places it on her rashes, trying to soothe her pain. While they play, Seita spots a dead body floating in the water. Realizing the harsh reality, he immediately distracts Setsuko and leads her away before she can fully understand what death means. The pain of losing everything. When they return home, Seita notices that his mother's kimono, a cherished memory, is missing. He asks his aunt, who casually tells him, "I sold it in exchange for a sack of rice. It was useless anyway." Seita is stunned. That kimono was one of the last memories of their mother. Setsuko, too young to understand hunger over emotions, begins crying and clinging to the kimono, begging their aunt not to sell it. But Seita, realizing they need food, gently comforts his sister and lets their aunt trade away their mother's belongings. Later, Seita reminisces about the past, remembering the time when his mother had worn that same kimono for a family photograph. A time when they were all together, happy and safe. Now, everything is gone. Unfair treatment at the dinner table. That evening, their aunt hands Seita a jar filled with rice. Excited, he turns to his sister. "Look, Setsuko, we're going to have rice tonight." However, during dinner, their aunt serves a proper meal to her daughter and husband. But when it comes to Seita and Setsuko, she only gives them watery porridge. Seita, sensing the unfairness, whispers to his sister, "It's okay, Setsuko. We'll have rice for lunch instead." However, his aunt immediately cuts him off. "The rice is not for you. You'll eat porridge at lunch too." She then scolds him harshly. "You're old enough to understand. The ones fighting for our country deserve proper meals, not useless people like you." Seita lowers his head, swallowing his frustration. Realizing that in this war-torn world, kindness no longer exists, even among family. Forced to survive. Alone, Seita and Setsuko continue to suffer humiliation at their aunt's house. One evening, when they ask for their share of rice, their aunt sarcastically reminds them that she already gave them what they deserved. Setsuko, still innocent, argues, "But we should get the first share of the rice. We sold our mother's kimono for it." Hearing this, their aunt gets angry and defensive, snapping, "Are you calling me a thief? Is this how you thank me for taking care of 2 orphans?" She finally loses patience and tells them, "From tomorrow, cook your own food. I won't make anything for you anymore." Fending for themselves. Realizing they can no longer depend on their aunt, Seita takes Setsuko to the post office once again and writes another letter to their father, desperately hoping for a response. After that, he visits a store and buys a small stove and cooking utensils, preparing for a life where they will have to cook for themselves. Now, the 2 siblings begin preparing their meals in the aunt's garden, while inside the house, their aunt and her family enjoy a proper meal. Seita's cousin, seeing this, innocently asks, "Mom, are you still mad at them?" Her mother replies coldly, "Yes, I am." But instead of apologizing, they decided it's better to cook their own food. Seita soon runs out of rice and goes to the ration store. However, the shopkeeper tells him that the next supply will only arrive next month. For now, he is given just a small amount of rice, barely enough to last. Hunger and desperation. One afternoon, Setsuko starts crying out of hunger. Seita, wanting to cheer her up, hands her the tin of fruit drops. But when she eagerly opens it, she finds it empty, not a single candy left. Seeing this, she cries even harder. Seita shakes the tin, hoping for something, and manages to find a few tiny candy fragments. Setsuko happily eats a small piece, but saves the bigger piece for later, trying to make it last as long as possible. That evening, even the last bits of candy are gone. Seita, desperate, fills the empty candy tin with water and gives it to Setsuko, calling it fruit juice. When she takes a sip, her face lights up. "It tastes just like the fruit drops." Seita smiles and tells her, "Now you can taste all the fruits at once." Dreaming of a home that no longer exists, days pass. The siblings continue living in a shelter, struggling for food. One day, Setsuko tells Seita, "I don't want to stay here anymore. I want to go home." Hearing this, Seita remembers the time when they were still at their aunt's house. He had once played the piano, and even back then, his aunt had taunted him. "How can you play the piano in times of war? Don't you have anything better to do?" Now, with nowhere to go, he realizes how much they have lost. Not just their home, but also the warmth of a family. A new home in the shelter Seita snaps out of his memories and reassures Setsuko. "We should stay here. This shelter is better for us." This shelter, a small cave, is isolated, away from the cruelty of their aunt and the suffering of the war-torn town. Hearing this, Setsuko excitedly imagines their new home, pointing around. "Look, big brother, this will be our kitchen, and here we will cook food." Unlike their aunt's house, Setsuko actually feels happy here. Seita and Setsuko gather whatever belongings they have left and bring them to the shelter. Since the cart they borrowed belongs to someone else, Seita returns it to the owner. Before leaving, he asks, "Do you have any extra raw food?" The owner kindly replies, "Not much, but enough for you both." With some food in hand, they return to their new home, finally cooking a proper meal after a long time. That day, for the first time in weeks, they eat until they are full. As they enjoy their meal, Seita jokes with his sister, "If we run out of food, we might have to eat frogs." Setsuko laughs, but deep down, they both know food is already becoming scarce. A moment of light in the darkness. One evening, while washing dishes in the river, Seita hears Setsuko approaching. He tells her, "It's already night. Go back inside the shelter." Setsuko, scared, clings to him. "There are so many mosquitoes biting me and it's too dark in there." This gives Seita an idea. Fireflies. That night, the siblings catch hundreds of fireflies and release them inside their mosquito net, filling their tiny home with a warm, glowing light. For a brief moment, they forget about the war, their hunger, and their suffering. Lying beside his sister, Seita hums a patriotic song, remembering the time he once saw his father's battleship sailing proudly. Before he can finish his song, he notices that Setsuko has already fallen asleep. A burial for the fireflies. The next morning, Seita wakes up to see Setsuko digging a hole in the ground. He watches in silence as she carefully places dead fireflies into the hole, covering them with dirt. She turns to him and asks innocently, "Big brother, Why do fireflies live such short lives? Seita freezes. The way Setsuko buries the fireflies reminds him of how their mother was buried. He is shocked to realize that Setsuko knows the truth. She looks up at him with sad eyes and whispers, "Auntie told me. Mommy is never coming back." Tears well up in Seita's eyes as the weight of everything crashes down on him. Despite knowing the truth all along, Setsuko never complained. She suffered in silence, holding on to whatever little happiness she could find. Overwhelmed, Seita bursts into tears, crying louder than ever before. A desperate struggle for survival. Seita reassures his little sister with a promise. "One day, we'll visit Mother's grave. But for now, their hunger is unbearable." In desperation, they visit a farmer, hoping to buy some rice. However, the farmer refuses, explaining, "Because of the war, even I barely have enough for myself." Disheartened and empty-handed, Seita and Setsuko start walking back home. A risky escape and a small blessing. As they walk, a fighter plane appears overhead. Terrified, Seita grabs Setsuko and jumps into a nearby bush for cover. There, he notices some vegetables growing nearby. Seita quickly grabs a few, eating some himself and sharing the rest with Setsuko. They continue walking, but along the way, a man becomes suspicious of them. Sensing danger, Seita quickly takes his sister and escapes. The harsh reality of starvation. The next morning, Seita gently combs through Setsuko's hair, searching for lice. Her condition is getting worse. Her rashes have worsened due to the heat in the shelter, and she is malnourished. She also suffers from diarrhea due to poor nutrition. Seita realizes that stealing food is now the only option. That night, he sneaks into a sugarcane field, hoping to steal some. But before he can escape, the farmer catches him. Punished for desperation. The farmer is furious. Despite Seita's desperate apologies, explaining that he only stole for his sick sister, the man shows no mercy. He beats Seita harshly and drags him to the police station. By the time they arrive, Seita is already bruised and weak from the beating. The police officer looks at the injured boy and scolds the farmer instead. "You've already beaten him enough. There's no need for further punishment." He dismisses the case and lets Seita go. As Seita stumbles out of the station, he is shocked to see Setsuko waiting for him. She had followed him all the way there. The moment she sees him, she runs up and hugs him tightly. Tears stream down Seita's face as he realizes how powerless he is. Setsuko, still innocent despite their suffering, gently tells him, "If you're hurt, you should get an injection." Seita holds her close, feeling an overwhelming guilt. He can't even afford proper treatment for her. A dangerous plan. As their food runs out, Seita comes up with a reckless idea. Whenever air raids happen, people rush to the shelters. During those moments, he sneaks into abandoned houses, stealing leftover food and clothes. With no other way to survive, he risks his life every time bombs fall from the sky. Seita's desperation grows. With each passing day, the war made survival even harder. Whenever air raid sirens wailed, people rushed to the shelters, leaving their homes behind. But Seita took the risk of breaking into empty houses, searching for food and supplies. During one such raid, he stole a kimono and hurried back to his aunt, hoping to trade it for some rice. But his aunt coldly refused, dismissing the kimono as worthless rags. Seita returned to the shelter, his heart sinking. Setsuko's failing health. Upon reaching the shelter, he found Setsuko unconscious on the floor. For a moment, his heart stopped. Flies buzzed around her motionless body. Terrified, he called her name. A second later, her eyes fluttered open. Relieved but panicked, Seita rushed her to a doctor. The doctor examined her and simply stated, "She has diarrhea and severe malnutrition. Just feed her properly." Seita's frustration boiled over. How am I supposed to feed her? Can't you give her medicine or an injection? The doctor shook his head. Food is the only cure. No medicine can help. Enraged and helpless, Seita stormed out of the clinic, carrying Setsuko in his arms. A brother's love. Outside, a man selling shaved ice had just left. Seita scraped up the leftover ice from the cart and carefully fed it to Setsuko. She smiled weakly, savoring the cold sweetness. Trying to lift her spirits, Seita asked, "What do you want to eat? I'll get you anything." Excitedly, she made a long list: rice, eggs, watermelon, and, of course, her favorite fruit drops. Seita forced a smile and promised, "I'll go to the bank tomorrow and get money. I'll buy everything for you." Setsuko held his hand tightly and whispered, "I don't want anything. Just don't leave me." Seita's heart ached. Whenever he left to find food, he had to leave her alone during the air raids. She was scared of being left behind. A heartbreaking truth. The next day, Seita went to the bank to withdraw the last of their savings. There, he heard devastating news. Japan had surrendered to America. The war was over. His mind refused to believe it. He turned to a nearby old man and asked, "Is it true? Did we really surrender?" The old man sighed. "Yes, we had no choice." Then came the final blow. "All of our Navy ships have been destroyed. The entire fleet is gone." Seita's hands trembled as he pulled out a small photo of his father, an officer in the Navy. Realization hit him like a thunderbolt. His father was dead. He stared at the photo, his voice shaking. "I hate you." His father was gone. His mother was gone. Now, only he and Setsuko remained. The final goodbye, Seita rushed back to the shelter, forcing a smile. "Look, Setsuko, I brought lots of food for you." But as he approached, his heart sank. Setsuko sat on the ground, weak and dazed, chewing on something. When he looked closer, his breath caught in his throat. The tin box that once held her favorite fruit drops was empty. Instead of candies, it was now filled with small marbles. She had been eating pebbles, mistaking them for sweets. Seita's hands shook as he checked her mouth. Inside, instead of candy, small stones. His sister's mind had given up before her body. Tears blurred his vision as he gently lifted her frail body. "Look, Setsuko, I brought watermelon for you and I didn't even steal it." Setsuko weakly smiled, her tiny hands holding two small rocks. "See, big brother, steam rice balls. Eat them with me." Her voice was barely a whisper. Seita couldn't hold back anymore. He sobbed uncontrollably. Still, he cut a small piece of watermelon and gently placed it in her mouth. Setsuko smiled softly, whispering, "Thank you, big brother." Then she closed her eyes and never woke up again. A brother's last duty. That night, Seita lay beside her, unable to sleep. Memories of happier days flashed before him, their mother's laughter, the warmth of home, the nights spent catching fireflies together. And now, he was all alone. The next morning, Seita prepared for Setsuko's final farewell. He bought a wooden box for her cremation. The shopkeeper coldly advised, "Don't waste too many clothes, use dry wood." Seita carefully laid her body in the box, placing her small doll, her belongings, and the empty fruit tin beside her. But at the last moment, he took back the tin, holding on to it as a final memory of his sister. He looked at her peaceful face one last time, then gently closed the box. As the fire consumed the pyre, he sat beside it for hours, watching the ashes rise into the sky. His entire family gone. The end of Seita's journey. The next day, he gathered the ashes and placed them inside the fruit tin. With nothing left, he left the shelter, never returning. Weak, starving, and lost, he wandered aimlessly until he reached a train station. There, his body finally gave in. His frail form collapsed, the tin box still clutched in his hands. Later, station workers found him. They carelessly tossed his body outside, just another nameless victim of war. The tin box fell open, spilling Setsuko's ashes onto the ground. The wind carried them away. A tragic silence. The war had ended, but for Seita and Setsuko it was too late. As the city moved on, no one remembered the two children who once chased fireflies in the night. Their story faded into the silence of history. A reunion beyond life. As the wind carried Setsuko's ashes away, something mystical happened. A soft glow appeared beside Seita's lifeless body. It was Setsuko's spirit. She looked around, searching, until she saw him. Her beloved big brother, now just like her, a spirit freed from suffering. She smiled brightly, running to him. "Big brother, you're here!" Seita turned, his eyes widening. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he smiled back. He gently took her hand, just as he used to when they were alive. Together, their spirits watched the world around them. The same city that once burned in flames was now alive again, thriving, rebuilt. They sat on a hill, overlooking the bright lights of modern-day Kobe. But their souls no longer belonged to this world. Slowly, hand in hand, they faded into the night, becoming part of the stars. Just like the fireflies they once chased. A story that should never be forgotten. This heartbreaking tale was inspired by true events from World War II. The writer Akiyuki Nosaka lost his two sisters to malnutrition, just like Setsuko. His adoptive father was also killed in the bombings. He wrote this story as an apology to his own sister, because, like Seita, he too felt helpless in saving her. War did not just destroy cities. It shattered innocent lives. And that is why Grave of the Fireflies remains one of the saddest war films ever made. What did you think of this story? Let me know in the comments below. We'll meet again in another movie explanation. Until then, sayonara. Hi.